Despite his rugged good looks, cool guy reputation, and Hollywood success later in life, Steve McQueen's youth and early years were punctuated with struggle. Terence Stephen McQueen was born in 1930 at the dawn of the Great Depression. He was abandoned by his alcoholic mother to be raised until aged 8 by his grandparents and an uncle on a farm in rural Missouri. His uncle was one of the few adults in his childhood of whom he had fond memories. He would go on to live again with his mother and 2 successive stepfathers, both of whom were physically abusive. Today, we look at the fast-paced life of a film icon, Steve McQueen. You are listening to Remember This with Phil Adair.
You'll get it over your radio and see it on television.
President Kennedy died at 1 p.m. Central Standard Time.
We were just a band who made it very, very big, that's all.
I have a dream.
It's one small step for man.
Thank you very much.
How did all these people get in my room?
Well, it's hard to tell.
I don't know, I've had a sinking feeling all night.
Charlie's good tonight, isn't he?
What else makes a good party?
Don't discuss unpleasant topics.
Oh, I'm so happy.
And now for something completely different.
Doesn't that sound exciting to you?
In his teenage years, McQueen bounced back and forth between living on the streets, his mother's home, and his uncle's farm. His life was one of beatings, rebelliousness, and petty crime, and he was eventually sent to a boys' home, the California Junior Boys Republic, where he stayed until the age of 16. The institution left a profound mark on McQueen, and he would go on to support the institution for the rest of his life. McQueen eventually landed in the Marine Corps, a 4-year experience which was not surprisingly riddled with resistance to authority. After numerous scrapes, demotions, and even a month-long stay in the brig, McQueen committed to the discipline of the Marines and was eventually honourably discharged with positive memories of his time with the service. By 1952, McQueen decided to use his GI Bill funds to study acting. He supplemented his earnings by racing motorcycles, and even in his early days of driving, he was often successful. In 1955, he moved to Hollywood, where he landed bit parts in film and TV. Throughout the 1950s, McQueen worked steadily in television, culminating in the successful series Wanted, Dead or Alive, in which he played a bounty hunter. McQueen's first big break into film came in the early 1960s when he was talent spotted by none other than old Blue Eyes himself, Frank Sinatra, and given a small part in the film Never So Few. His full-time career started somewhat modestly, then with The Blob. Let's start with The Magnificent Seven, a movie in which McQueen nearly stole the rug from understar Yul Brynner in the acclaimed movie. He next portrayed a brash but wily escape artist in The Great Escape, 1963, giving acclaimed performances in The Cincinnati Kid, 1965, The Sand Pebbles, 1966, the latter of which earned him his only Academy Award nomination. Following a small break from the screen, McQueen entered into his most memorable phase with The Thomas Crown Affair, 1968, and Bullet, also filmed in 1968, which featured what many consider to be the greatest car chase ever seen on film. After the underperforming race movie Le Mans in 1971, he had one of the biggest hits of the year with The Getaway in 1972, where he starred alongside Ali McGraw, and he delivered a solid return as an escaped prisoner in Papillon, 1973. He was, in the 1960s and into the 1970s, as big a star as there was, and the most highly paid one in 1974, standing on equal box office footing with such contemporaries as Paul Newman. He even turned down starring roles in such blockbusters as Close Encounters of the Third Kind, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, and Apocalypse Now, choosing instead to play a cowboy in Tom Horn and a contemporary bounty hunter in The Hunter. In his personal life, McQueen's rebellious, competitive nature proved to be a lifelong companion. He was famously antagonistic with directors and co-stars, and he considered Paul Newman as his professional rival. McQueen also passed on Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid because he and Newman couldn't agree on who would receive top billing. He also missed roles in Breakfast at Tiffany's, Ocean's 11, and Dirty Harry, among others, some due to scheduling conflicts, to be fair, and others due to McQueen's personal whims. Steve McQueen was married 3 times. His second wife was actress Ali McGraw, whom friends claimed was his true love, and he had 2 children with his first wife, though he was connected with numerous other women and actresses in Hollywood over the course of his career. He was a prolific drug user, smoker, and drinker, and his love for racing never waned, and he enthusiastically embraced every opportunity to drive and do his own stunts in his films. He would eventually own a collection of 130 motorcycles. Steve McQueen forever changed the definition of the Hollywood leading man, with roles as quiet but tough protagonists who sought their own methods outside the bounds of authority. Dubbed the King of Cool, McQueen ushered in a new breed of anti-heroes who commanded the begrudging respect, along with the large salaries of studio producers and directors, while attracting millions of moviegoer fans around the world. And McQueen was Hollywood's King of Cool for a reason. His legacy lives on today in a new generation as his image is ubiquitous in culture, especially hipster culture, and he also still appears in modern films like the recent remake of The Magnificent Seven. In The Great Escape, McQueen played Virgil Hiltz in a role that propelled him to superstardom. Then there's his role as the detective Frank Bullitt. He literally flies his car through the streets of San Francisco in what is regarded by many as the greatest car chase in cinematic history. Steve McQueen was not cool because he drove the Bullitt car. The Bullitt car was cool because Steve McQueen drove it. During the mid-70s, Steve was definitely the #1 movie star in the world, and he is still used as a point of reference for masculinity and coolness to this day. He was and is the definition of an American icon. McQueen was a private guy. In the late 1970s, he was once approached in person by Tribune film critic Gene Siskel, who had initially been rebuffed in his attempts to interview the actor. Siskel asked, "Do you think there's a chance we could do an interview in the future? Should I call your press agent?" McQueen replied, "Maybe. Look, I'm sorry, but I just don't do interviews. I haven't given one in 7 years. Yes, I have a press agent, but his job is to turn down interviews." There is no doubt that this reluctance to talk about himself, especially to writers, he once said, "I just can't figure writers," helped to burnish his star. It actually seems refreshing, doesn't it, in this brand fashioning what I ate for breakfast internet age? Mystery fascinates, but does not explain. In a rare 1966 interview, McQueen himself declared his goals, and they weren't solely based on getting extra screen time. "I've leveled off in some respects, plan my business and my career ahead now, and try to schedule my work so I'll have time off," said McQueen. "I just want the brass ring and the pine trees and my kids and the green grass. I want to get rich and fat and watch my children grow." McQueen is celebrated as one of the most important actors in Hollywood history. He lived a brief, fast-paced life. "There is just so much legacy there," he said, "but I think the lasting legacy is this individual who represents freedom, who represents pull yourself up by the bootstraps, a street kid that made it big." And that's sort of the American dream, isn't it? Back to Steve McQueen in Bullitt. Bullitt was one of McQueen's best-known films in terms of critical acclaim and commercial success. The film spoke to his love of cars and driving. The plot begins with McQueen's maverick police sergeant character Frank Bullitt being assigned to protect a mob defector Johnny Ross from retribution before he can be called as a star witness in a hearing on organised crime. An assassination attempt is made, and through a series of aliases, cover-ups, and other twists and turns, the viewer is led to a dramatic conclusion. The film is noted for filming extensively on location and capturing realistic depictions of police procedural detail at the time. That being said, the most memorable scene in Bullitt is the car chase, in which Bullitt, in a Ford Mustang, chases two hitmen in a Dodge Charger through the streets of San Francisco. The scene took nearly 3 weeks to film on location. At the time, it was certainly groundbreaking, even though it might seem slow compared to modern-day car chases. Nevertheless, Bullitt is certainly one of Steve McQueen's most iconic works. Following the epic disaster movie The Towering Inferno in 1974, McQueen's career hit a downslope that was later revealed to be the result of his battle with lung cancer. Though his life and career were cut short at age 50, McQueen remained one of the most iconic and beloved film stars of the latter half of the 20th century. In 1980, at the young age of just 50, Steve McQueen died from pleural mesothelioma, a type of cancer associated with asbestos exposure. McQueen believed it originated from high exposure to asbestos while in the Marines. And if you would like to take a deeper dive into more Steve McQueen, I have placed a link inside the show notes, which will take you directly to the famous car chase from Steve McQueen's movie Bullitt, filmed in 1968 on the streets of San Francisco. Link to that in the show notes. Also, a lot of people often ask what happened to Steve McQueen's car from Bullitt. Well, after filming, the Mustang was sold to a Warner Brothers employee and later to a New Jersey police detective. He in turn sold it for $6,000 in 1974 to Robert Kernan of Madison, New Jersey, who held on to the car until he died in 2014. That car, the 68 Mustang Steve McQueen piloted in the film, was thought to be lost to time. Until recently. Sean Kernan, son of Robert Kernan, who purchased the car decades ago, unveiled recently that his family had been sitting on the legendary Mustang for some time. Robert, who has since passed away, had ignored multiple requests from McQueen to sell the car or even trade it for a similar Mustang, and had let it sit since the clutch went in 1980. Since 2018 marked the film's 50th anniversary, Sean decided it was the perfect time to get the legendary car driving again and to share it with the world. The car was showcased at the Detroit Auto Show alongside a new limited edition 2019 Mustang Bullitt. And if you're curious as to how much the Bullitt Mustang is now worth that Steve McQueen drove in the movie, well, that iconic 1968 Ford Mustang GT sold for $3.4 million at auction in 2020. Did Steve McQueen do his own stunts in The Great Escape? In one of the most widely known secrets in Hollywood, we all know that Steve McQueen didn't actually jump the fence in The Great Escape. His buddy, mentor, and bike builder Bud Eakins did, mainly because the studio was worried that Steve might hurt himself. You may not know this, but Steve McQueen was being talked about to star in The Bodyguard. Yes, that movie, The Bodyguard, the 1992 hit film about a private security guard played by Kevin Costner protecting a pop singer, Whitney Houston. It had been in development for years. The script was originally written back in 1975 for McQueen by Lawrence Kasdan, who would go on to write 1981's Raiders of the Lost Ark. Diana Ross was considered for the part that ultimately went to Houston. McQueen was also one of the names talked about for the role of John Rambo in the adaptation of David Morrell's 1972 novel First Blood. Really hope you have enjoyed the content today. I am a mad Steve McQueen fan, as you can probably tell. I know many of you out there are. He just had something about him. So my salute today is to the king of cool, Steve McQueen.
You ask them what it is about rock and roll music that they like, first thing they'll say is the beat, the beat, the beat.
All right, Mr. DeMille, I'm ready for my close-up.
Just turned 22 years old. I must be the greatest.
Think you used enough dynamite there, bud? You're only supposed to blow the bloody doors off.
You despise me, don't you?
Well, if I gave you any thought, I probably would.
What you just said is one of the most insanely idiotic things I have ever heard.
This is your last chance.
Take your stinking paws off me, you damn dirty ape!
Hell, I like this.
What we've got here is failure to communicate.
Just say the word and I'll throw a lasso around it, pull it down.
Surely you can't be serious.
I am serious. And don't call me Shirley.
You gotta say, I'm a human being, god damn it!
I wish I knew how to quit you.
I could have been a contender.
Keep the change, you filthy animal.
Tony, what are you talking about?
May God have mercy on your soul.
Frankly, my dear, I don't give a damn.